Close your eyes and picture this. You see a nice, green, grassy, open field. Off to your left, there's a couple of rolling mountains and blue skies above them. To your right, you can see a large stream with plenty of fish jumping in it. And this spot has been chosen for a brand new town. And you are in charge of building this town. So let's get started. Building a fantasy town follows the same rules and principles as building any kind of town. There may be a couple of key differences here and there, but the core of the structure is still very much the same. So you can look to current real-world towns for inspiration on how to develop your own fantasy towns if you want to make them believable. So the first thing you need to think about is when you're planning to make a fantasy town, what is its core purpose? Why does this town exist? What was the reason this town was built here to begin with? Is this town a trade city? Is this town a stopping point for people who are traveling from bigger capitals? Is this town purely meant to focus on one resource, and because they need people constantly gathering that resource, it's been built around it? Is this the dream of maybe one person who had a big enough dream that a lot of people collectively bought into it and have helped them achieve it? The choice is up to you, but for the purpose of this practice town we're going to build in this video, we're going to go with this purpose. There were two major capitals along this travel route, and it was quite a journey to travel between these two routes. So a lot of people would often camp on the side of the road and set up little partial tents to then continue their trek the following day. Enough people got annoyed with this that they banded together and they said, why don't we just make a small little town with actual roofs over our heads so we don't have to set up temporary camps anymore. We can actually stay in this town. And with this initial idea sprung multiple more ideas. Not only would this make a safe place for people to stop and rest between traveling between these two major cities, but it also would offer protection in the form of actual buildings rather than just small little camps. Building on this even further, maybe some people don't want to live in these massive towns because it's either too expensive or it's just too overwhelming. But the idea of a small town being cheaper, more affordable, and more outdoorsy while also still being in relative safety and nearby to major cities, both of them, would offer a lot of luxuries. So with this, you now have not just tradespeople and traveling merchants wanting a stake in this town, but also people who just want a different type of feeling than a major city. So all of these people would come together and decide, all right, let's make this small little town and let's get started. But first things first, where do we get the resources? Like I mentioned in that opening vision, where they're building this town is rolling fields. There's not a whole lot of trees around, so the trees have to come from somewhere. And because that wood has to travel quite a large distance, people would have to wait a long time to build homes completely out of wood, or they would have to get creative and use different types of material. You could easily hand wave this, however, and say, no, there was a large forest nearby and they took all of those trees and now the forest is gone, but now they have their town built completely out of wooden homes. Which, hey, it's your place. You want to do however you want to do it. However, while people are working, people still need to eat. Luckily, there's that river I mentioned, which is full of fish. So now people have a clean drinking supply of fresh running water and a consistent supply of fish. So after several weeks to a month, you probably have a small little functioning town beginning to evolve here. And with this, you can evolve the town into multiple different ways. What is in that mountain? Is there maybe mines in that mountain where ore can be found? Or is it an off-limits mountain where maybe there are some unbeknownst creatures that are waiting to prowl? And from here, you can evolve this into many different ways. Now, we've already discovered that this town is primarily meant for merchants and traveling people between these two major cities to stop at. So what is going to be in abundance of this town? Taverns and inns. People are going to need a place to rest their weary head. It's the whole reason this town was built off of. So your most valuable resources are likely going to be building either one or a couple of very powerful inns and taverns where there is always an abundance of people. Not just the merchants and travelers who are coming in and out of the town, but the people who live there as well. They will make this their own watering hole. And just from that, you can create your own conflicts within the town with just that idea. Because this place has so many people coming and going, you're not always going to get the best types of people coming into this place. And with that, maybe some of the people who live here are tired of seeing brand new faces here all the time, and they just want some peace and quiet. That's the whole reason they left the city. But now that there's all these new people coming to their favorite tavern, they're starting to get annoyed. And maybe they stop letting people come through the town. Or maybe they take advantage of this fact and they start charging exorbitant prices for people to stay at the inn and the tavern, because where else are you gonna go? On the side of the road? That's the whole reason we're here. And if you want a nice bed, you gotta pay the price. And on top of that as well, because of the abundance of fish in that river, they are the sole provider of food. And if you want anything other than fish, it's going to cost a whole lot of money. They have fish in a plenty, so you can get them for very low prices. But if you want anything other than that, it's going to be an exorbitantly high price. It's the little things that you can always branch out of and create so much more from them. A lot of fantasy towns and cities and most make-believe places are usually really, really cool in theory and surface level, but when you start really diving into it, it completely falls apart. But what I'm hoping you get from this video is that even the smallest little things can really make this seem very, very believable. That small little thing about fish being very, very cheap and affordable because there's so many of them, and even things simply as chicken being more than fish completely makes sense. This is not a farming town, this is a river town, this is a stopping town for merchants and travelers. They make use of the fact that if you want a roof and a bed to sleep in, you're going to be staying in this town. And if you want food to go with that, well, you can get fish, which we have tons of, or you can get something a little bit more exotic, like chicken. Because this is not a farm, and maybe only one person here even takes care of chickens, and they make a killing off of it. It's small things like that that make this town very believable and very realistic in your world. And you can change things and still get the same sort of realism out of it. Take away the river, how does this town get its water source now? Maybe the town has a well, somewhere central that everybody can have access to and everyone is free to use it. However, if that well ever collapses, or the water ever drains up, or something gets in the way, that town is going to go into an absolute panic. Because now everybody is going to be involved in getting that well operational again, otherwise the town is going to dry up, and they're going to be either A, waiting around for rain to provide them with some kind of water, or they're going to have to start importing water from the cities. And you know the cities are going to charge them a massive up cost on that. Because even if the city has an abundance of water, the fact that this town needs their water is what's going to drive the price. Because it's important to remember that the seller doesn't set the price of the product. It's the buyer. If you need water and you need it desperate enough, you will pay whatever price you have to. And you could use that same principle for the fish this town sells if we are still going with the river idea. Because yes, maybe they have an abundance of fish and you really need to eat something. You've been traveling on the road for days and you don't have anything except for the few bit of ration jerky in your pack. Well, if you want food, yeah, we have an abundance of fish, but you'll pay whatever we ask of you, otherwise you'll starve. Now one could argue, well, maybe they need to sell the fish at very, very low prices because the fish is gonna go bad. Well, maybe that is the case as well. It's your town, do what you wish. If the river is full of fish and it never ends, maybe they can let a couple of fish go bad. It doesn't overly matter. They're still charging an exorbitant cost and people are still paying that price so they can keep a profit. It's your town and you can design it however you want. But remember, it's the small little details about the town that can really make it believable. And you don't have to have everything fleshed out about this town either. You can simply put in a couple of key details and let your readers or your players make what they want out of it. For a small example, let's say this town has two different inns. They both operate as a tavern and an inn, and they're in competition with each other. However, at night, on the doors of both inns, you can see one inn doesn't have a padlock. The other one has a massive padlock. And from there, your readers or your players can ascertain so many different things. Is that massive padlock necessary because this inn recently suffered a break-in? Is the reason the other inn doesn't have any sort of padlock is because they're trying to become more welcoming and showcase that you can come in at any time? Maybe the inn with the massive padlock has not recently suffered a break-in, but they're holding something very valuable inside and they don't want anybody taking from it. Does anybody know if there's anything valuable inside? And on the theories can go. And you yourself don't even need to write a conclusion to this. You can simply put it there and let the imagination of your players or your readers run wild and see where they take it. But it's the small things like that that hint at a larger, bigger world, at a larger, more developing story. And it's the small little key details that will make them the most believable. But what about the people in this town? How do you make believable characters to populate this town that you've just built? Well, if you want to learn about how to make NPCs believable and fit perfectly into your world, I'd recommend checking out this video here where I tell you everything you need to know about how to make a believable NPC.